All right, welcome to Touchdown Talks. I'm Spencer Taylor. This is going to be my Week 4 reaction for the 2024 NFL season. I can't believe that we're already through 4 weeks of NFL football. We're already heading into Week 5 here in a couple days. We're already to the point of the season now where pretty much every week, at least for the next couple months, teams are going to be having their bye weeks. It's kind of crazy. We are fully into the middle parts of the season at this point. We're not quite there yet, but we're pretty much a quarter way through the regular season for the NFL. But without any further ado, just want to go really quick over some of my thoughts and analysis from this week, things that I saw. League-wide, I do want to point out some things about underdogs and home teams. Interesting this week, really this whole season, of course, being that it's been early in the season, that's part of it. But this week, pretty decent week for underdogs. Underdogs went 7-11 so far, or in week 4. So in week 4, 7 out of the 16 underdogs ended up winning their game. Underdogs against the spread were 10-5-1, so really good week as far as betting. Underdogs against the spread this week was really good. And then for home teams, pretty even split. We think of home field advantage as being a huge deal in sports, and in certain levels of it, it certainly is, including the NFL, it can be. But as we've seen in the last few years, or at least as I've recognized and heard mention of in past seasons, yet again this season, we're starting to see that, NFL or that home field advantage, it does matter in the NFL, but maybe not quite as much as some people would think. Home teams in week 4 went 9-7 overall, and against the spread, home teams were 8-7-1, so pretty much 500 across the league for home teams. So really not that big of a difference from being a home team or an away team. Again, it also depends on the team. Some teams are better road teams. Some teams are better away teams. Some teams play in home stadiums that are very loud and have very good crowds. Some not so much. Obviously, for example, the Chargers and Rams playing in LA, they quite often don't have the greatest home crowds. LA is one of the spots these days that is quite often very full of fans for the away team, so they might not necessarily, for example, get the greatest home field advantage as far as noise, whereas, like a Detroit these days with how much hype is around their team and the fact that they're in a dome, it's a little bit easier for it to be loud in there. So home field advantage is also just simply not equal for each team, and some teams are just simply better at playing on the road or at home, but just some interesting stats for you there really quick. Another takeaway for me is with officiating, two things with officiating. First of all, the refs continue to be officiating offensive line play very strictly when it comes to illegal formation, specifically with the tackles lining up too far behind the line of scrimmage. That's getting called pretty strictly still. And then also illegal man downfield, which in the NFL is an NFL getting, or a non-eligible receiver getting just past 1 yard beyond the line of scrimmage. Specific stuff in the play. If an offensive lineman gets too far downfield, that's a flag. And as I said there, in the NFL, it's pretty strict. At like the high school level, at least in Utah, for example, it's 5 yards, but in the NFL, very strict. It's only 1 yard, and we've been seeing that get called very strictly this year. It's cost some teams, especially ones with maybe offensive lines who have been struggling more with penalties. And then one other note that I have just right here before I forget, a couple things about some player news. So for the 49ers with Christian McCaffrey, it was reported, I believe Monday, that Christian McCaffrey, apparently it's been found that he now actually has Achilles tendonitis in both legs. Last week he had traveled to Germany to visit a specialist, and through the process of that, in the last few days. That was what was discovered, is that that Achilles tendonitis has moved into both legs. So certainly not good news there for Christian McCaffrey and the 49ers. Certainly things shaping up to him not being available for quite a good chunk of this, at least the regular season. Other player news for the Raiders, it was announced today that Davante Adams has officially requested a trade from the Raiders. We'll have to see over the next week or two how things go. Obviously, we've got quite a few weeks until the trade deadline, so there's plenty of time for things to happen. It's very possible we still see him on the Raiders for a bit. Of course, he's dealing with the hamstring injury, so even if he stays a Raider for a while, we might not, there might not be much left of actually seeing him even playing for the Raiders. We'll have to see, what happens first, him getting healthy or getting traded. I have no idea. I would venture to guess that he'll be healthy and playing for the Rams again before he gets traded, but it's hard to know. I mean, especially if he's requested this trade and he wants to get traded, he might be more motivated to, get healthy and push himself to play. Even if he's not 100%, he might be more motivated to push himself if he's on another team at that point, rather than if he's still waiting to be traded. Something like that. And then the other reason why I say it's hard to know for sure is because honestly, with this whole Raiders Davante Adams situation, things have just in general progressed a lot faster than I thought. As I said, I could see this taking a while, being that we're not that close to the trade deadline yet, so there's plenty of time. But with how things have progressed, I mean, I've been saying it for weeks now. I can't remember if I was saying it before the season started. I very well may have at some point, that I suspected that we could end up seeing Davante Adams get traded mid-season, and certainly once the season started, I know I've mentioned it before, that I believed that, there was enough, tension there and enough expectation that the Raiders weren't going to be that great, that it was believable that Davante Adams may end up being a trade target. It doesn't help that the Raiders, as we expected, haven't been playing well. Obviously, the team itself, they probably hoped they would have been doing better than this, but those of us on the outside that have been, honest, I think most of us, including, Vegas, the sports books anyways, nobody expected this Raiders team to do very well this season. I believe Vegas had the Raiders over/under win total at 6.5. So certainly not a very high win total to bet on there, even set by Vegas. So, with that, I mean, that's why I expected Davante Adams was going to be a trade target. I did not think it was going to get this dramatic and this quick. And the reason it's been that, if you're not aware and you haven't seen things on social media as to why, first of all, we had Davante Adams got injured. I believe it was last week in week 3. Didn't play in week 4. And then before that, I believe it was week 3 or week 2, that was when Antonio Pierce had the interview that I included in a video. It's on here on YouTube on Touchdown Talks, of Antonio Pierce talking about, he was very vaguely referencing the idea that some players have been making business decisions and in that game, and going forward we're going to make decisions of our own as the team. And it was unclear who he was referring to, and since then there's been speculation as to who Antonio Pierce was talking about, but personally I think he was talking about multiple players, and I do believe that Davante Adams was included in that. And since then, again, Davante Adams didn't play this past game for the Raiders, out with a hamstring, but then just a day or two ago from when I'm recording now, and when you're watching this video, just a couple days ago, there was a Instagram post from Sports Illustrated that was talking about a report from Michael Fabiano that he wouldn't be surprised if Davante Adams was near to playing his last snaps as a Raider, and he wouldn't be surprised if Davante Adams was traded soon. And Antonio Pierce, the head coach of the Raiders, liked that post. And of course, the way things go on social media, you're a guy of his status, and you like a post like that, people are going to catch it. And sure enough, people caught on to it and started sharing the fact that he had liked it. He pretty quickly removed the like, but too late. The evidence is out there. There's recordings of his profile being seeable on the list of profiles that had liked the post. So he had liked this post discussing the fact that the Raiders may trade him. And again, he removed the post, and at first everybody kind of expected, okay, are the Raiders going to just try to downplay this? And then earlier today, Davante Adams in the morning was on the Up and Adams podcast, and, credit to her. She did a really good job of doing it in a respectful way, but talking to Davante Adams, asking him about that post and his thoughts. She asked him if he had talked to Antonio Pierce or not, and obviously that the whole subject would have been pretty tough to interview a player on, and be respectful, but also press the question and actually try to get an answer. And Davante was trying to, did a pretty good job also as a player, answering things right, didn't, cause any drama right there in the call, but it was very obvious that he didn't really necessarily love talking about it, didn't want to, pretty much gave non-answers. Basically, all that he gave on that podcast was, no, I haven't talked to Coach Pierce since that. I haven't, and that was basically all he said there. And then really it was only a few hours later that it was announced that he had made an official request to the Raiders that they trade him. Now, of course, the Raiders don't necessarily have to trade him. He is under contract, but again, he's injured. He might be more motivated to play if he goes on with another team. And yes, they don't have to trade him, but for the Raiders, it's obviously not likely you're going to go anywhere. I mean, as much as fans don't want to think this way this early in the season, front offices to some extent are. They're thinking the long game. They're not just thinking about one season at a time. So the front office may already be wanting to think about, okay, this season isn't our year. We've got a lot of needs on the roster, obviously. We don't have the answer at quarterback. Likely don't even have the answer at head coach. Need a lot of other parts all over on the offense and defense. The Raiders have plenty of needs. So for them, it may very well make sense to, find a good suitor that can, one that Davante Adams will be okay with, that, he won't, it'll be one that likely will be best if it's one that he is willing to go to. And then, for the Raiders, it'll obviously be one that they can get the best deal for him. They'll likely be, if I had to guess, and from this speculation I've heard, the Raiders should probably end up being asking for at least an early second-round pick or a late first-round pick. Of course, it depends on what team you end up trading to and what they'll have, but chances are they won't want to trade him inside of the division. I mean, I know people have talked about, of course, the Chiefs are a team that certainly would love to have another receiver right now, but obviously, typically in sports, teams don't like to trade within their own division, so that probably won't happen. Obviously, the Jets are another team that's been thrown out there. I could definitely see that. But wherever Davante Adams is going to end up landing, we'll just have to see. But again, don't be surprised if these things with Davante Adams and the Raiders move faster than we might expect. Again, there's a chance it goes all the way to the trade deadline. It takes a while to get done. But I also wouldn't be surprised here if he's already traded in the next week or two. I wouldn't be surprised. But of course, it probably also just depends on how much other teams are willing to be aggressive in making good offers to the Raiders that they can't turn down. So other takeaways from this week, again, we had a lot of good games. Some that were pretty close, some that maybe the box score doesn't look that close, but felt closer. First off with Thursday night, really quick, that was a stinker of a game again. Al Michaels was, if you watched the game, you know that the first half was insanely painful to watch. I mean, honestly, the whole game was pretty painful to watch. But in the first half alone, there were 12 penalties called. 9 of them against the Cowboys, 3 against the Giants. But there were even more flags that were thrown than that. And, some of those penalties withdrawn by the officials. But Al Michaels on the broadcast was very frustrated and disgusted with the flags towards the end of that first half. I honestly, to me, that was almost the only somewhat funny and enjoyable part of the broadcast was feeling the pain with Al Michaels and the fact that he was so disgusted he wasn't even really trying to hide it. Every time there was a flag towards the end of the second quarter, he was very obviously unhappy to see it, especially because it felt like pretty much every play or every other play there was at least a flag that got thrown. So it was very frustrating. It was a pretty close game, but at the same time didn't feel that close, honestly. I mean, the Cowboys, for the most part, controlled the game. I mean, they got out to a lead at the beginning and then never let up. I mean, the box score wouldn't tell you that. They only won by 5 points, 20-15, but they got out to the lead at the very beginning of the game, and the Giants never really felt like they were threatening to take the lead away, so they just couldn't do anything on offense. I mean, the result of that game was Cowboys were able to get into the end zone a couple times, whereas the Giants literally just settled for field goals the whole game, and that's why they ended up at 15, is because they went for 5 field goals, and that was all they were able to get. So, more not so great news for the Jets, or for New York fans, I should say, with the Jets. They and the Broncos played in New York. 2 home games for both New York teams, and unfortunately for New York fans, I believe I saw that the number was, 140 plus thousand fans went to, a combination of the Jets and Giants games, and both those games combined, New York fans didn't get to see their teams score a single touchdown in MetLife Stadium. So, pretty unfortunate bad beat there for New York fans, and both teams lost in very low-scoring, ugly games. The Broncos-Jets one, honestly, even more ugly. Finished 10-9 with the Broncos getting the win, and just disgusting loss for the Jets. I mean, in the first half, they held Bo Nix to 7 out of 15 passing and -7 yards in the first half. By the end of the game, Nix finished with, I believe it was about 60 or 70 yards, but that's still really low. And both teams, it was a wet game. The weather did play a factor, certainly, but both teams, played pretty sloppy in that, and especially the Jets couldn't get anything going, couldn't find the end zone, and, a lot of, good bit of drama after the game. Robert Saleh saying after the game that he felt that the team maybe needs to tone down their use of cadence, which is something that Aaron Rodgers brings. He's known as being really the best quarterback in really football history at using cadence. That's one of the biggest things that makes Aaron Rodgers so special as a quarterback, is that he's really good at using cadence, using stuff pre-snap, often getting defenses to jump off sides, get that free play. I mean, that has been Aaron Rodgers' bread and butter, especially late in games, and it was something that the Jets offense was really struggling with, had a lot of false starts, and so Saleh after the game says, we need to tone down on the use of cadence, and then right after that, when Aaron Rodgers was interviewed, he said, "No, I don't think we need to tone down the cadence. It's just, we've been using it in previous games. We've been using it in practices. We just didn't execute well. We just need to do that better this going forward." And then the next day on Monday, Robert Saleh, kind of classic between Saleh and Rodgers. They say two different things, and who usually is the one that ends up walking back their statement? Robert Saleh. Monday, he kind of walked it back and said, "Oh, no, that's not what I meant. I just, meant we hadn't been executing enough, and we just got to get better at that." And it's like, no, that's not what you meant. You said that you needed to tone it down. You just, you and Rodgers had a disagreement, and he won. We know the power dynamic there with the Jets. And another more exciting game for the week was Vikings-Packers. Very exciting game. Vikings barely getting the win out, 32-29 in Lambeau Field. And to be fair, this one was another one. Box score was really close, and it was a pretty entertaining game. But for the most part, it felt like the Vikings were in control most of the time, and they certainly deserved the win more. I mean, they were up 28-7 at half, and yeah, the Packers made the score a lot closer in the second half, but Packers also had some sloppy play on special teams and some other things that cost them, some fumble stuff. So really, I know Packers fans were not very happy with the game. So, and I mean, Vikings, I made the video last week. Some of y'all have told me that even in that video, I'm, not giving the Vikings enough credit. And I don't necessarily disagree. In that video, if you listened, I said, the projection I left with you in that video was Vikings will finish about 10-7. But I did also say that at their highest potential, I could very well see them, and especially at this point, having won that game in Lambeau, which honestly I thought, especially once it was announced that Jordan Love was going to be playing, I thought the Packers might be able to eke out a win at home, but they weren't able to. Love played a little bit rusty as well, coming back off the injury. But yeah, anyways, for the Vikings, I really think right now, again, my projection, I would still say I could very well see them ending up at like a 10-7 or 11-6, something like that. Again, we're early on in the season. I know they're 4-0, but crazier things have happened. So, and they do have some tough games coming up. So I do think they will lose more games than certainly some fans might think right now. But at their highest potential, I would not be surprised at all if they finish even 13-4, which is an excellent record. I mean, if they finish 13-4, that would likely be the best record in the league, if not second best. I mean, at best, you're going to get 14, 13-win teams most of the time with this 17-game schedule. So, at best, I could even see them getting to 13 wins. But that's if, the Vikings are able to stay healthy. That's one of the things is the Vikings have been pretty lucky, at least compared to some of the other teams, with not having too many key injuries. They had Jefferson have that quad injury for, a short bit, but that only took him out for part of a game that they still won anyways, and then he was able to come back in the next week. So, they haven't had him miss any game. I know they had Jordan Addison out for a couple weeks, but they were just fine without him. He's a great receiver, but he's not their number one wide receiver. They haven't had any injuries at quarterback yet, anything like that. Obviously, don't wish any of this on any team. I'm just saying, you look at a team like the Chiefs, they're dealing with injuries at wide receiver, may have just lost Rashee Rice for the season. That's not confirmed yet, but it's feared that Rashee Rice tore his ACL. So the Chiefs are dealing with that. There's teams like the Rams, for example, who lost Nakua and Kupp to the injured reserve, have also had issues with pretty much their whole offensive line being hurt at times this year. So, there's plenty of teams, even good ones, that are ones that we expect to be good, who have dealt with a lot of injury. And again, it's not that the Vikings have been perfectly healthy through 4 weeks, but they've, at least compared to some teams, they've had a little less injury. And so certainly, if unfortunate things do end up happening and players miss time, there will be some games they likely lose eventually, even if it's not due to injury. Other things, they'll lose some games. So for the Vikings right now, I would say anywhere from about 13-4 to about 9-8 is probably a pretty good guess of where they'll be. Again, 9-8, very bottom of what I think they'll be at right now. I do think the Vikings do show the potential, especially with the good coaching they've got. Again, Sam Darnold playing like an MVP candidate right now. I mean, if we were to vote on the MVP right now, he would be number 1 or 2 right now. So, quite likely number 1. He would probably win it today if you voted on it. So, again, if they keep playing like that, yeah, winning 13 games is not unreasonable at all. And I think they are very much in the conversation for may end up winning the NFC North even, and very likely a number 1 or 2 seed in the NFC. So I think this is a very surprising but very impressive year for the Vikings. And so I did enjoy and respect their win against the Packers. And also, again, it wasn't just me coming into the season that was down on the Vikings. Before the season started, ESPN Analytics had the Vikings at a 24% chance to make the playoffs. And now, being that they're 4-0, you've seen the stats. Going 4-0 is pretty good percentage-wise for your chances to make the playoffs. So, I mean, really, if you think about it, if the Vikings just go about, if the Vikings go 500 the rest of the way, they're likely a playoff team. So, that's pretty crazy there. Other games, a lot of interesting stuff. Some upsets here and there. For the Cardinals Commanders, that one was another one that surprised me a little bit. I, like many, had kind of expected the Cardinals to maybe get a close win against the Commanders. The Commanders are another team that's a very shocking team with how well they're playing. Washington, through 4 weeks, is 3rd in points per game. The biggest concern, and one of the reasons why some, including myself, thought they might lose this week, is the Commanders don't have the greatest defense. Their defense is one of the worst in the league at the moment. They don't have a really good secondary. But, I mean, honestly, with how that Washington offense is playing, doesn't matter. As we saw in Arizona this week, they dominated the Cardinals 42-14. And I don't necessarily think the Cardinals are that great of a team. Some weeks they look really good and some not so much. But, the Cardinals are a weird one that, at the very least, they at least have moments almost every week this season where Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. looked really good. But outside of that, I don't know, the Cardinals are kind of weird. But for the Commanders, Jaden Daniels is on a historic run. The Washington Commanders as a whole, this is their best franchise start to a season since 2011. And Jaden Daniels in this week's game went 26 for 30, 233 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, and ran it 8 times for 47 yards and another touchdown. So he's had an electric start to the season, especially for a rookie. Continues that. Other games, Chiefs-Chargers game, it was a close one. The Chargers barely covered the spread at 7.5. They only lost by 7, but did lose the game at home there in LA. And then, of course, biggest headline, as I mentioned earlier, Rashee Rice taking a rough hit to the leg, and yeah, it's feared that he's torn an ACL. Hopefully it's not that bad. Tests haven't yet been able to confirm what the injury is, but even if it's not a torn ACL, it certainly looked like one that you would expect he'll probably miss at least a decent amount of weeks from it. And then Sunday Night Football was a pretty decent one. although it was it was kind of a surprising beatdown, honestly. The Bills visiting the Ravens. I did think the Ravens were going to win this one, being that the Bills have looked really good, but they were on a shorter week, and the Ravens at home, and we know how they are, and between Henry and Lamar, they just gashed the Bills defense, and the Bills offense, for that matter, couldn't do a whole lot. Ravens won 35-10, and Derrick Henry now, with that game, had 2 touchdowns in the game, and that was his second week in a row this season with 2 touchdowns or more. So Derrick Henry, he's another one of those players. I mean, at his age, I knew he was going to have a chance to be really good this year behind that Ravens offensive line. That was one of the things I said when talking about fantasy and drafting him, but at the same time, I didn't have him nearly high enough in my running back rankings because he's older for a running back. I still expected he'd be one of the better running backs in the league, but this good, I don't know. He's insane to watch, and it helps to be sharing the same backfield as Lamar Jackson and having that good O-line that they have. And then speaking of Derrick Henry and his previous team, going into Monday night, we had a tale of two sides of the NFL. We started Monday night with the doubleheader, beginning with Titans-Dolphins, very painful game to watch. And I'm sure, unless you're a Dolphins-Titans fan, I'm sure you, like I did. Now, I watched both games all the way through, had multiple monitors up, but I'm sure, like myself, if you're an NFL fan just of other teams or in general, you likely started out watching Titans-Dolphins, and as soon as Seahawks-Lions came on, your main focus switched to that, and the Titans-Dolphins became your corner TV game that you maybe glanced over at and kind of went, ugh, and then looked back at the actual fun game. Titans-Dolphins, neither team was playing very good. It started out with both teams' quarterbacks trying to give away the game. Will Levis, who wasn't even in the game for more than a quarter, gave up an interception on the second play of the game, which was awesome for me because I had bet money on him to throw an interception. So that cashed out almost instantly, which Levis is on an insanity run of just bad plays every single week. Every single week he gives us some sort of hilariously bad play. So I'm sorry to Titans fans, but it's bad. And you're another team that, unfortunately, coming into the season, we didn't have much expectations for. Now, on the other side, for the Dolphins, it's just an unfortunate story of since Tua got injured, they have not looked competent even at offense, and their defense isn't very good. And so the Dolphins they look bad. They only scored 12 points against the Titans, who have an okay defense. I think the Titans' defense is all right, maybe even underrated to an extent, just because the Titans, again, one of the worst teams, not very highly thought of this season. But I do think that defense that they have is decent, at least around average, which is certainly better than how they play, at least at quarterback. And also, an interesting stat, Titans fans, you'll like it, Dolphins, close your ears. The last 2 times that the Titans have scored 30 points or more have both come against the Dolphins. This one on Monday, and then the previous time before that the Titans had scored 30 points and more was actually in 2021 against the Dolphins. So Titans have, not had the greatest last few years, but 2 of their best games both came against the Dolphins. And yeah, it was just an ugly game. As I said, Levis started out not great. On the other side, for the Dolphins, starting Tyler Huntley, he wasn't having a good game. He only just got to the Dolphins, within the last week or two, and obviously he's a backup. But it was certainly in a way a good night for Tua. it certainly went to show that, hey, without Tua, this Miami squad is not near as good. So as far as Tua's stock goes, the game kind of helped him a little bit. And this was sort of a interesting game that Will Levis got hurt, and it ended up being Kyle Rudolph, who's now on the Titans, previously had been with the Steelers. He came in and led the Titans, and honestly, they looked decently good. And I can't say Rudolph played all that well. If you look at his stats, he didn't really do that much either. They mostly won the game on the ground with Tony Pollard and their other running backs and parts of their running game. That was really how the Titans won that game. And again, they were also against the Dolphins, who just couldn't do anything on offense. That's another thing. Tyreek Hill at wide receiver. I wouldn't be surprised if, there's already been plenty of discussion on it this last day or so now because of it, but Davante Adams has requested a trade. Tyreek has not requested a trade or anything, but I would not be surprised if Tyreek is also very high in the discussion this next few weeks for teams trying to look for a wide receiver. And, who knows? Depending on how bad things go, maybe he does request a trade. Seahawks-Lions being the final game, as I said, the actual good game of Monday night. This one was certainly one of, if not the best games of the week to watch. The Lions got the win. They controlled the game pretty much all the way through, but at the same time, the Seahawks kept it pretty close and pretty competitive. Again, the final score doesn't look that close, 42-29, and the Lions had the lead pretty much the whole game, but the way the Lions are, one of the things they struggle with is game, situational stuff. And because of that, there were a couple moments where, it looked like they were going to let the Seahawks back into the game. Because of that kept it interesting. The game didn't feel over until the end of it. So, this wasn't one of those games where we had starters coming out with 5 minutes left to go or something like that. But Jared Goff had a historic night. Geno Smith also had a pretty great night as well, but for Jared Goff, he became the first NFL player to he became the first player in NFL history to complete 75% or more of his passes, pass for 200 plus yards, and have a receiving touchdown. Goff had a pretty crazy night. And to be fair, they didn't really ask him to throw that much, but still, he not only did he throw for more than 75% completion, he was 100%. He threw 18 for 18, 292 yards, 2 touchdown passes, and again, he also had a touchdown reception that was thrown to him by Amon-Ra St. Brown. And honestly, for Amon-Ra, pretty decent throw as well. It was a trick play, 7-yard touchdown, and also some credit even from Jared Goff, because obviously it was a backwards pass by Goff to Amon-Ra, and then Amon-Ra waiting, and really well timed throw and execution. Jared Goff running out to the side. Amon-Ra throws it, and Jared Goff catches it and gets into the end zone. It was a really well-executed play, and I did really like seeing that from Ben Johnson, the Lions coordinator, and again, especially the execution from the whole team on it. But yeah, it's a historic night for Jared Goff, also a 155.8 rating in that game. And then finally, just really quick, you knew it had to be coming. The Bears game. The Bears won against the Rams. This is the first game of the season that I had predicted the Bears to lose before the season started, and even leading up to the game this past week, I had predicted the Bears were going to lose. I thought it was going to be a really close game, but I thought the Bears were going to lose, and they were able to get the win. I I mean, I know the other one was against the Titans, but I don't know. I think the Bears seem to play better at home, especially the defense. And I mean, the defense for the Bears is what's stronger right now. Makes sense with Matt Eberflus being the head coach, and also with the pretty good roster on defense that they've been able to build up over the last couple off seasons. But yeah, the Bears defense really dominated the game, and for the offense's credit and for Caleb Williams' credit, they played pretty well. And this was another game that I would say I think Caleb Williams improved. Certainly, he didn't outdo his yardage numbers he had from against the Colts. He didn't break 300, but that's okay. As far as like actual execution, his quarterback rating, completion percentage, a lot of those things, also just watching the film of how he played, he showed some improvement. And part of that, the Bears got the run game going a little bit. They actually got DeAndre Swift going. He was able to break a pretty good run for a touchdown for 36 yards. So yeah, I mean, it's amazing what can happen if your offense can get itself together and actually have somewhat of a run game. It's pretty amazing how well that helps a rookie quarterback. Who would imagine? But yeah, it was a pretty fun game to watch, and also for Jaquan Brisker for the Bears, a lot of credit to him. He had a very close to interception early on in the game that got called back because he had stepped out of bounds before making the interception. Had that very early on in the game, and then to finish the game pretty much at the very end with a minute left to go, he intercepted Matt Stafford to ice the game. So, I was pretty happy for Brisker that he was the one to make that interception and play. But yeah, for the Bears, and as a Bears fan, I was very happy with that win. It was one I did not expect the Bears to have for this year. And so far this year, again, that was a game that I predicted wrong, but there was also a game earlier this season, that being against the Colts, because I had predicted the Bears to beat the Colts. And for the pretty fair predictions for the Bears coming into the season, a lot of people expected the Bears to be about 2-2. I mean, the expectation was that the Bears would beat the Titans, lose to the Texans, beat the Colts, and then lose to the Rams. Again, the results flipped for the Colts and Rams games. But either way, with that, they're 2-2, just as I expected they would be. And with that, I mean, the Bears do have certainly the last half of the Bears' schedule, starting in week 11. That's when the Bears' schedule is going to get really tough. So certainly there's a lot more to come. And again, I'm not saying that I think the Bears are going to be, have that great of a result by the end, but I still think for the Bears, the potential is anywhere from about 8 wins to about 11 wins. That is where I think the Bears are going to end up in. It's really going to come down to, first of all, winning some of these gotta-have-it games. Upcoming here, Bears do have Carolina. That's going to be a pretty much gotta-have-it game. It's not going to be easy. The Panthers have been playing much better with Andy Dalton as the quarterback. So I do expect the Panthers to keep it close, but that'll also be in Chicago. The Bears will then be in London against the Jaguars, who have been struggling, but the Jaguars typically do pretty well in London, and they're certainly more experienced with going to London, so that one will be a weird one. Pretty hard to predict. I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears lose that one. Certainly preseason, that's what I predicted, is that the Bears will lose that one. Then the Bears have a bye week, and then they'll be playing the Commanders. That one will obviously be much more tough than most of us would have expected coming into the season. Also, the Bears in the last couple years have struggled against the Commanders. The teams have played each other pretty close in each contest, but the Commanders have been able to come out on top. And then on the road against the Cardinals, that's going to be one that might be another tough one, but might be a gotta-have-it game. Then after that, they'll have the Patriots. That'll be their final, gimme-ish game. Certainly the Patriots. That should be a gimme. That one's a have-to-have-it game. But after that, there's no more gimmies for the Bears. It's at home against the Packers, and that'll be Week 11. I'll be at that game in Chicago. Then they'll be at home against the Vikings, who, as I've talked about, I very much underestimated them coming into the season, and I think they're much better. I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears get swept by the Vikings, or if I'm lucky, they somehow split that matchup, the two with the Vikings, but wouldn't be surprised. So, again, starting from Week 11 there, Packers, Vikings both at home. Then they're on the road against Detroit. Then they're on the road against the 49ers. Then on the road against the Vikings. So, insane stretch. Then back at home against the Lions. And then the Bears have their final home game against the Seahawks on Thursday Night Football late in December. And then their final game of the season on the road at Lambeau Field. So, yeah, from Week 11 to Week 18, Bears are going to have a very tough gauntlet of games. So, the Bears really need to stack as many wins as they can between now and Week 11. So, yeah, and then after Week 11, they're going to have to find some ways to win some of those actual tough games. And if they're able to do it, as I said, they can get as high as 10, 11 wins, but they're going to have to really prove that they can do it at that point. And quite possibly, the defense is going to have to do a good amount of the work. And then last thing, before I end this episode, I want to give you sort of a power rankings of sorts, tiers of sorts. I don't know. I haven't done power rankings. If you want to see power rankings from me, let me know, and I'll start doing those weekly. It's certainly not a super hard thing to do, but I don't know. Personally, I've been resistant to do power rankings. One, just because a lot of people do it already, and then two, because I'm not the biggest fan of power rankings, just because it's kind of, I mean, it depends on who's making the list, but a lot of power rankings, in my experience, from what I watch, just feel kind of frustrating, because a lot of times it's just, they're going just straight up based off of how well that team did that week or so far in the season, and they don't take anything into account of, you know, what they're likely gonna end up doing later in the season. It's very much, you know, right here in the now rankings. So you have these teams that every week are jumping up 8 spots and going down 9 spots. So I don't want to do that. You know, I also don't want to make a list that's just too much based off the standings, but obviously the standings do matter. So, you know, so instead, at least for this week, I've got here for you sort of a pyramid of tiers. They're within each tier, they're not ranked. It's not left to right or right to left. But within each tier, this is kind of where I think the top 28 teams are in the league. There are 4 teams missing from this list, but, you know, those 4, I'm sorry if your team's not on here. They're a team that I've decided they're, again, this is a pyramid, so keeping it clean looking, 4 teams couldn't make the cut, and so that's what happened for them. I'm not going to go into it super crazy. Let me know down in the comments, where did I put your favorite team on this pyramid? What do you think of where your team's placed? And then also just in general, what team do you think I have too high, too low? Let me know down below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit subscribe, leave a like rating on the video to help me in the algorithm, and comment down below what you thought of the video. Always appreciate and enjoy communicating with those of you who are watching, and I will see you in the next video.